So welcome everybody to the March meeting of the Outdoor Ministries Institute, which is funded through a grant from the United Church Foundation New Ministries grant. We're just talking before we hit record that this is our third year of three for the Outdoor Ministries grant. So if you have another source of funding that you would like us to explore to continue this, feel free to send it my way or to send it to Janice. We will there's only one, well, there's numerous things we could talk about. Summer camp is coming, and we have with us a special presenter tonight. My introduction is that Chris Hudson will be our special presenter. That's why he is on the call. Chris has been a co-host of mine on the Camp Hacker podcast, and if you haven't listened to the Camp Hacker podcast, you don't know what you are missing. Chris has been a co-host for, is this 3 years or 4 years in? I don't even know how many
It's
years.
probably closer to 3. It
Yeah.
feels like forever, but no.
So Chris is going to talk to us, and he is one of the co-founders of Camp Highlight, and he is talking to us about Skill Will Hill Skill. I don't know the order, but I'm sure he'll get
Skill,
all of
will, and
those
hill.
things right. So I will.
Surprisingly, I have notes on all of that.
Perfect. I will spotlight him and let him be the recording as we go. And everyone, this is Chris Hudson.
Hi, everybody. I am so excited to be here with you. There's a whole slide that tells you how amazing I am. So we'll get into all of that. But I just did want to start and say that I'm very excited to be here with you. Joe and I have been talking about this for months. I have been working on this for a week, which doesn't need a week to work on it. I was just super excited. So without any further ado, I'm going to share my screen because I have some slides. And let's just jump into it, yeah? So, can you all see the screen? Yes? Fantastic. I love that for us. So, I can't see it, but that's cool. I kind of wrote the whole thing, so I think I know where I'm at. In any case, welcome to Skill, Will, and Hill, Crafting Successful Staff Interventions. So, welcome. Right, showing up right now is just our brief agenda of what we'll be doing over the next 35, 40 minutes. But I want to answer the question, who are you? What are you doing here? And why are you telling me these things? My name is Chris Hudson. When you talk about me later to your friends, family, please use the pronouns he, him, and his. So I'm a social worker. This summer will be my 31st season at camp, which is something I cannot believe or understand. I've been working at camp since I was 19 when I stumbled into an information session one day and said, this will be a fun way to kill this summer. Next thing you know, here I am all these years later. Like Joe mentioned, a couple of years ago, I can't do math over the pandemic. 13 years ago, a friend of mine and I were alarmed by some of the news about LGBTQ families. And so what we decided to do was create a haven for children from LGBTQ families. It's called Camp Highlight. It's a sleepaway camp for that population of children. This is our 13th year. And so, Camp Highlight's a teenager now. It's rowdy, rough around the edges, but still full of love and lovable. I'm a social worker. I've worked with children. I said children's. Hello. I work with children and families. I was a therapist for many years. I taught social workers at Columbia, which was really exciting. And I was teaching during the pandemic, which was less exciting. But nowadays, when I'm not at camp, I'm a consultant and I'm a staff trainer. Issues of DEI, LGBTQ inclusion, staff management, behavior management, all different kinds of management, different aspects of camp. I have had the opportunity and really the blessing to be involved in camp for so long. And now I want to share that with other people. I sit on a bunch of boards. American Camp Association, New York, New Jersey. We just had our big tri-state last week. It was a smashing success. If anybody was there. Was anybody there? Is anyone there? I can't see you. You have to just come off mic and say, yeah, I was there. It was really fantastic. I'm also on the Pride vice president of the Pride Camping Association, which is a nonprofit which aims to make camps more welcoming for LGBTQ staff, families, and kids, and a new board, Black BIPOC Leadership Advancement Coalition in Camping, which aims to retain people of color in the camping industry because there are so many things that make us want to flee. So that's a little bit about who I am, a little bit about my experience. So before we get to goals and guidelines, uh, I would just like to, if everyone could just in the chat right now, yes, it's going to be that kind of session. If everyone could just in the chat right now, just say your name, where you're from, and 1 to 2 emojis just about how you're feeling right now while I go through the goals and guidelines, okay? And be honest. Be honest about how you're feeling right now, and then we'll see if we can decode how people are feeling based on their pair of emojis. All right, so these are the goals that I laid out for us over the next 40 minutes or so, is that the skill, will, kill rubric is useful in assessing staff needs. I want us to be thoughtful and intentional, which is my favorite word, about how we intervene in coaching with our staff. I want us to share with each other. Yes, it's that kind of workshop. Share with each other what has worked and what has been challenging. And I want us to use an equity lens to detect barriers and work together to brainstorm how to remove them. So those are our goals. Let's talk guidelines. So first things first, we're here to communicate. If you can, please turn your camera on, but make sure your microphones are off. Why do I want your camera on? As I'm sure many people are like, oh my gosh, I'm in my underwear. It's not because I'm nosy. It's just because when you do a lot of these, I am usually staring at a whole screen of black boxes with people's names in them. Great for you, not so much fun for me. And as much as I'm in it for the teaching, I'm also in it for the fun. So if you're able to put your camera on, I would love to see the lovely people that I'm talking with. And do make sure to keep your microphone off. I'm sure your dog and your baby and your lawnmower are really exciting for you, but for other people, it might be a little much. We're here to learn. Please lean in, take a chance and ask questions. I realize I do a lot of these, and especially I've noticed a lot with like Gen Z is that they're so used to, they grew up getting information from YouTube. So the interactive piece really throws them. They have no idea what to do. They're like, oh, I thought you were just going to be talking at me. This is not something where I will just be talking at you. I'm expecting you to jump in and talk back. I'm really smart, like super smart. It's off the charts, really, but so are you probably. And so I want everyone else to hear what you have to say. We're here for community. So everything I said before, participate, share your opinions, support each other, make sure you pass the mic, make sure you encourage each other to share. And lastly, this is a discussion. It's not a lecture. I have some stuff to say, and I will be saying it, but then I want us to discuss it. We're in a small group, and I just feel like let's use this opportunity to, chat. I love chatting. I'm just going to pop into the chat. Speaking of chat, I'm going to pop into the chat real quick. I'm just going to guess. Let's see. Joe is happy and hungry. Lana is cool and working out. Steve is cool and happy. Alex is, everything's A-okay with Alex. And he's just laughing, laughing, laughing. Let's see. Janice is magic, I guess. Jill has fallen asleep. Oh, no, wide awake now. And Kylie's upside down in a backpack. Emily's tongue's out. Erin's having a birthday party. Did I get all this right? Am I getting all this right? There's no time to correct me. I think I'm right. Colleen is sleeping with her unicorn. Kathy is nonplussed and then just nodded off to sleep. And who could forget Isabel, who's just laughing the night away. That was right? Yes, Colleen? Thank you. Thank you. I'm really good at reading emojis. It's one of the languages I speak, along with English. Uh, so you're all here to hear about the skill and will matrix. I want to talk a little bit about this. This was I would love to say that I created this, but it actually predates me entirely. This was something that I can't remember who, but was created in the 70s to sort of lay out how do we work with staff to get the best out of them. So let's dive into skill and will. First off, if you know anything about the camping industry, you know that staffing is difficult. It's just difficult to staff camps. Joe and I talk about this on the podcast. Seriously, Joe, every topic is one way or another related to staffing problems. Lately, staffing has become more difficult for a variety of reasons. Namely, there was a huge pandemic. And in that pandemic, a lot of young people were isolated. They've lost a lot of social skills. But on top of that, a lot of them have reevaluated how they want to spend their time. Speaking of which, when the Band-Aid was ripped off of work from home and everyone had to work from home, now there are so many opportunities for young people to continue working from home where they have their showers and their bathrooms and they don't have to live in the woods for 6 weeks at a time. That is something that we are now even more in competition with. And then, sorry, this is the only graphic I could find, is miscommunicated expectations about the role. That is something that I don't know how new that is, but I think especially given the other two things that I've mentioned, like being really clear about what we expect from counselors and what counselors expect from camps, I think sometimes that has been coming into conflict. So these things are making staffing more difficult. So one of the questions that I'm asking every year is how do I make sure that I am doing my best to intervene with the staff, to coach them towards success, and be really intentional about it. Intentionality is kind of my thing. So when I found the skill and will matrix, it really lit me up. Let's talk about skill, what I mean by skill, and what I mean by will. So it's skills. It's the degree to which you have the capacity, the competency, and the knowledge to perform your role effectively. It's knowledge-based, it's experience-based, it's things that you can learn. It's things that you should get better at with repetition. On the other hand, there's will. Will is the degree that you are motivated, feel confident, and ambitious enough to complete your tasks efficiently. Unlike skill, will is attitude and emotions based. So it's not something you can learn. It's something that can grow. But also I find, and we can talk about this later, I find it's something that can dip over time. So where skills over time generally should get better, will tends to go down. But before we go into that dark place, let's talk about how these things intersect and behold the skill-will matrix. It says in my notes, hold for applause. Ugh, that's so awkward. Oh, yes, the skill-will matrix. Thank you. So let's just lay these things out on the matrix, and then we can talk about what kind of staff members in each quadrant. So first, we have our high skill, low will. We have high skill and, hold on, I'm sorry. I lost my notes. Guess what? We're going to do this from memory. Are you ready? Are you ready for this challenge? Let's go. Your high skill and low will employee it can be someone who's been there for a while, right? Like I said, over time, their skills are where you want them to be. However, their motivation is flagging, okay? So good at the job, but maybe not so much in love with the job or the role that they're in anymore. Moving on, high skill and high will. These are your high performers. These are people who get it, right? They're on board with the mission. They're on board with the vision. They wake up every morning. They're like, what can I do? What more can I do? They're the ones who are taking it upon themselves to educate others skill-wise or motivate others will-wise, hopefully. Moving on to the third quadrant, low skill and low will. Now, This can sometimes be our newbies, right? They show in, they don't have a lot of skill. They're not sure what to expect. So they're maybe on the fence about camp life, or the role in general, right? This is applicable to anything, but I'm applying it to camp, right? And last quadrant, we have our low skill, high will. I can't wait to hear from you all, but I'm just gonna tilt my hand a little bit. Low skill, high will, for most people, it's such a growth opportunity. That's someone who comes in, they join your organization, they're like, I love everything that's going on here. I definitely want to be a part of this, but they can't do much, right? Because of their lack of experience, or maybe the way that they learn, whatever it is that their skill level is so much lower than their motivation. I'm tilting my hand a little bit. I find this quadrant to be the most difficult, much more so than low skill, low will, because will, I'm sure as we'll talk about, is something that's hard to instill. It's hard to really motivate people. And when people come in with a high will, you're like, yes, half the job is done. But then they're like, what's a camp? And I've never hung out with kids before. And you're like, oh, Jesus Christ, am I going to end up on the news? So for me, this is the hardest one. I want to hear from everybody here, or just, and also one thing about me, when I do these, please don't raise your hands. I feel like I used to be a sixth grade teacher. I've had my fill of it. It feels so weird when adults are like, oh, and I'm like, yes, like, I don't know. It makes me feel weird. So if we could all be mature and patient and responsible, if you want to share, just come off mute and start talking. And then if you hear someone else do that, maybe wait until they're done. So given this, can anyone describe for me, not based, I want to hear, I want to gossip, right? Can you think of people you work with, or employees or staff members who you could fit neatly into one of these quadrants? Just take like a minute to tell us about them. Pick a quadrant and tell us about a real person. And should we change the names to protect them, or should we just be like, no. Give their full names and addresses. Go ahead.
So I'm actually,
Hi, Colleen.
hi. I was contemplating the low skill, high will person today.
Tell us more. How timely. You're
yeah.
like a Schumann segue machine. Thank you. Colleen,
Well,
everyone.
I happen to have someone who has been on and off our team for many years, since 2016, so before I was the director. And they love camp, and they are so excited about camp, and they want to do camp, and they have great ideas, and they never follow through. Like, it's just, there's no follow through. It's like their interview does pretty great. Very enthusiastic, knows about camp, doesn't do any of the skills.
Doesn't have the skills.
Like, just doesn't seem to have the, we've trained them, we've talked to them, we've worked with them, and so we're not going to hire them. And then they emailed us back and said, would you please reconsider? So we're in the process of, do we reconsider? And I'm kind of at a place of like, well, these are the very specific criteria I need you to demonstrate for me, for me to reconsider, because they are someone with a lot of will, but the skill isn't there. And it doesn't ever seem to be there, despite the number of chances we've given them. So we're going to see. We're going to give them one more shot in a conversation, but not necessarily another summer.
You see, Colleen, I'm like I said, low skill and high will that's the one I need to sit through a training to figure out what to do with. What about anyone else? You have experience with that quadrant or any other quadrant?
I also today was contemplating low skill, high will, but we can talk about the idea of high skill, high will, and we have a particular staff member here who missed their CIT year because of the pandemic, but last summer was everything you wanted, right? Knew exactly what was what and wanted to be at camp, and she was amazing. And so much so that our camp director was literally like, what would we do without them here? And that's, I view this matrix when we're talking, and Chris, you and I have talked about the system we have of who gets invited back and not get invited back. If you just, I will hire back high skill, low will, and high skill, high will, but the other two, very questionable whether I would ever hire them back to camp. New people can be low skill, low will, or no, low skill, high will, low skill, no will.
No, I didn't say no will, Joe. I said low will.
I said no will.
You said no will, which is not on this matrix. Notice that. I mean, because the truth is, we're not hiring people with no skill and no will. We're just not, right? The reason why we say low will, low skill is because, surprise, this is about training and coaching, so it has to be up there. Anyone else? Anyone else would share?
Yeah, I have a thought.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see me. I'm outside.
I can see you.
Okay. We have a human who is really lovely, kind-hearted human who is graduating out of our leadership and training program and is now of the correct age to be core staff. Mm-hmm. And we very much in the high will, low skill domain has done CITing for 2 years now. One of those years was online, which sucked, as we all know. So we had to get out ahead of knowing that this person was going to apply for core staff and find the people that we knew were better for the positions so that our roster was full before we received that person's resume, which is kind of a really sneaky backhanded way around it. But this person really needs another year of development. And I hope that they'll come back and do leadership and training, and they then serve as volunteer support staff alongside our core staff for the summer. So that's how we got around it.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else want to rat out an employee or coworker? No. Yeah. Who's that? Martha, Jill, and Aaron all came off mute.
I'll listen.
Well, I was just going to say high skill and high will is great, but sometimes it can be difficult to manage as well because they really want to do a lot and really know a lot, but they might be, because of their high skill, they might be trying to do things or want to achieve things that maybe don't fit in with the big picture, which they might not know or know the whole big picture of things. And so we have a staff person this year who's high skill, high will, but the stuff they want to do doesn't necessarily fit in with long-term plans, long-term goals, or what else is happening with program. And so they've got the will, they've got the skill, and they think they have the knowledge about everything when they may not. So maybe it's high skill it's medium skill that thinks they're high skill, and that might be what makes it more difficult to manage.
That's much more difficult to manage than someone who's high skill. Medium skill who thinks they're high skill is really tricky. Aaron, are you off mute? Did you want to share?
Yeah, I've got one that I can think of this summer who will be a first-year staff and has some excellent skills and certifications, which are, in lifeguarding is helpful, but is in that really weird dynamic of wants to be at camp, so will, but not high will and not low will. This is a person who could go either direction.
Based on what?
I think based on peer influence. So I feel like if we with the right training and the right kind of guidance, will kind of play up, but without that could very well play down. And so is in kind of that weird middle ground. Do you know what I mean?
They're on the fulcrum. Yes, I see that. That's interesting. Martha, you get the last word on this. Everyone listen.
Yeah, I'm really interested by what everyone's saying. I feel like this can be a problem with adult volunteers too, which we rely heavily on. There's a lot of it there, and it's a tough thing to manage. But but it was interesting because last year we only had 2 weeks of camp after the pandemic. So we had that, like everyone, at least 2-year gap. So the CITs hadn't been there, anyway, you know the problem, but we had 3 or 4 high skill, high will last year, but then they got so burnt out the second week that at least one of them isn't coming back, but definitely a low skill, low will by chance. And it's just, tough to deal with. And I'm hoping I can figure out how to motivate them. But the other thing I was thinking of when I think it was Jill who was talking, I'm thinking about what are the characteristics, or like what skills do we really want them to have? And I feel like, yes, you need lifeguards and all of that, but other than that, it seems like people skills and modeling how we want to interact with each other and that kind of thing is almost the most important skill there is. Just I don't know.
We can have a 3-hour discussion
Yeah.
on what skill, you know what I mean? Because
Right.
the social piece for sure. Then there's like the common sense piece.
Mhm.
There's the teamwork aspect. There's a skill. Teamwork is a lot of will, but there's a lot of skill that's involved in it.
Yeah.
And maybe that still tracks back to the people skills, but
Leadership.
Leadership for sure. Thank you for sharing, Martha. All right, so
Thanks.
listen, I could name staff that fit in each of these quadrants, and I'm sure that we all can. So the real question is, and the reason why the matrix exists, is how do we get people in every single one of these quadrants to achieve more or better? And so let's look at this again, and let's think about our coaching interventions using this matrix. For each quadrant, there is sort of a different tack that we could take based on what people are presenting. So let's talk about the high skill, low will people. The high skill, low will people, their motivation is low, but they're good at tasks. They're good at getting things done. So what we have to do for people in this quadrant is excite them. Why is it? Why is their will flagging? Now, in this scenario in my mind, I always think of this as someone whose will was higher, but then disappeared over time. But that might not be the case either. This is also the case where someone might come in to camp from like a school or an after school or some other place where they have, to your point, Martha, maybe not all the skills, but they have a really good foundation, but they're not so sure about this camp thing, right? So exciting these people becomes really important. If it's the former, if it's someone who's been around for a while, that's why their skill's high, but their motivation's low, then maybe it's moving their role around. Maybe it's finding something in the environment that would rekindle that excitement for them if they've lost it. If it's someone who's not sure, then that's when we go into marketer mode. First of all, and this is just me as a camp director, high skill people, I will bend over backwards. If they ask me for money, I will take it out of my pocket and give it to them, because it's been my experience, I don't know about yours, but high skill camp professionals, I don't want to use the word rare, but I will say it's uncommon. So if it's someone who's on the fence about camp, and I get that from a lot of my teachers, they're on the fence about this kind of interaction, then it's really about rah, rah, rah. And I love to hit them with the mission and the vision and try to build them up and get them excited about what it is that we do together, right? Like, come on, it's the whole kumbaya moment. And we hope that will work. Moving on to the next quadrant, which at first doesn't seem like it's much of a problem, but then Jill introduced that sometimes it is high skill and high will. What do we do with our high skill and high will people? We use them, we delegate them, or we delegate to them to take some of the burden off of us. Look, at the end of the day, if you can identify staff that is high skill and high will, those people will be at your right hand. Those people will be your right hand. Those are the people that you can leave to train other staff, to excite other staff, because their will and their skill is so high. What else do I want to say about this? You want to find, or you want to work with them to make sure that they are still challenged, because what happens with people in high skill, high will is that, like I said, will dips over time and they end up back in the first quadrant, right? And then you have to excite them all the time. Usually I'm thinking, this is completely idiosyncratic and personal. I think of my high skill and high will staff, we have an open conversation about what they'd like to do in the future. Even as we are planning for this coming season, the assistant directors who are high skill and high will, I'm checking in with them. I was like, have you thought about being the director one day? What would that look like? Like constantly challenging them and then also giving them tasks and assignment. I can't tell you, this is the first time in 13 years that we have two extraordinarily competent assistant directors. And the best part about that is that I have taken 2 vacations already since September, and I'm taking another one in May. This would not have been possible 10 years ago. Thank you. I'm bragging also about all the vacations I'm taking. I was in Mexico, now I'm going to Spain. It's not a big deal. But giving these people something to do is part of challenging them. Moving on to the next one, low skill and low will. Oh, bless. Okay. Our low skill and low will. Again, just to highlight what I said earlier to Joe, I'm not saying no skill and no will. And that's critically important because I say this all the time. Do not fill camp with bodies if people really do not have the skill and really do not want to be there. The stakes are too high. These are other people's children. They should not be at camp. But we have a lot of people who show up. A lot of our 16, 17, 18, 19-year-olds, their skill levels are necessarily going to be low. That's not their fault. They've barely been alive, right? The 16-year-olds that work at camp, what have they done? Like maybe they back the car to the end of the driveway and they can use the bathroom by themselves. That's the list of their achievements by the time they're 16. So we can't really get on them for having low skill. And low will, again, if you are young, maybe that person wasn't a camper. Or maybe they were a camper, but as we all know, working at a camp and going to a camp are 2 different things. What we want to do with these low performers is direct them. It really is a firm hand. It really is sitting them down, setting up SMART goals, setting up a track so they can see their achievement, checking in with them. And this is a lot of work. Low skill, low will is a lot of work, which is why you use the high skill, high will people, you delegate some of this work to them. But directing these people is really going to be clear. I say this all the time. Without getting all emotional about it, I've been working in camps for 3 decades. No, I'll just say this. I think this is one of the most important jobs when it comes to youth development. I think more so than school. I really do think that. You can learn stuff in school, that's fine, but camp is where you learn all this other super critical stuff. And that is true for our low skill, low will people as well. They also need an education, and it's going to have to be pretty direct, and it's going to have to be pretty heavy-handed with them. And that's okay. That's okay, because we can move them into another quadrant if we're willing to put in the work. Lastly, our low skill, high will people, they just are happy to be here. They're just happy to be here. Yeah, I don't know where the 2 kids were. Like I had 10 kids on my roster. I got 8. Oh, well, I guess I lost 5 of them. But isn't camp great? Okay. Like I said, will is a hard thing to manufacture. People with low skill, high will, we really have to guide them. And we really have to be really clear about it. Yeah, they've got a great attitude, great working relationship with the team and the staff, right? But coaching is going to, the guiding is going to have to be as direct as it is with the other quadrant, right? That is setting up specific times to check in with them and also setting up a rubric where they can follow so they can see the skills that they are acquiring. The people on the low skill side, this goes for both low skill, low will and low skill, high will. I think one of the failings as managers is that we do not set up enough of a ladder whereby staff can look down and see where they came from. And this is part of a whole longer 2-hour training that I do, but I think that is really important to set up our workers to succeed. And what that looks like is sharing our vision for them with them. Too often, especially with low skill workers, too often we do a lot of time complaining about them to our high skill, high will people or our comrades, and not enough time letting them in on exactly what skills they're missing and why they are a little bit below average. So it really does take an honesty And it really does take not conflict, right? I feel like, especially with young people, whenever you talk about performance, they think it's a conflict. It's not. And it's less conflictual when you let them in to, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that you need help here, here, and here. So what I'm thinking is that this is where I'd like you to be by next Wednesday. So I want 3 instances of you doing this, and then we're going to talk about that, right? Really guiding them and coaching them one-on-one is great. I've also found some success putting the low skill, high will people in a group and then throwing one high skill, low will person in there. And hopefully you hope osmosis will happen, right? Between the two. So, okay. So that's our matrix. I can't find my notes. I'm sure there was a question I wanted to ask about this. Isn't this great? I spent all this time writing like methodical notes on every single slide. And it's on this desktop somewhere. I just don't want to get into it. So actually, yeah, so let's talk about this. Excite, delegate, direct, and guide. I'm just curious, where are you all at with this right now? Does this feel like something that is possible? What I often hear, I'm going to tip my hand, what I often hear is that, Chris, this is a lot of time. Like, I can't be guiding and directing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I agree.
Oh, Isabel, thank you so much. It was so quiet. Everyone was getting so uncomfortable.
Thank you.
I can't stand the silence. Yeah, that it can be daunting. Like I think about those low skill, low will folks there.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel for myself, sometimes I have to have a little argument with myself, because my initial attribution about that is usually that it's almost a decision for them. Like it's their fault that they're there. And that makes me then be like, I don't want to waste my time, because why do I have to do all this work? They should just be able to kind of pick up their socks and move on a little bit. So I know that's not true, but when I'm busy and cranky, that I can definitely get there, right? But I definitely agree with you that direct approach and that scaffolding, right? Where here's what we're looking for, here's what we need you to do. It's how I'm thinking we can get it done. That's the right approach. And yet, my crankiness can get in the way.
And you know what the thing is, Isabel, thank you for sharing that, because even though everyone else was silent, everyone else feels the same way. And I'm going to speak for everybody in the room, because the thing is, and this is like kind of like the hypocrisy that I experience when I go to camps. We are people who dedicate our lives to guiding and directing children. But when it comes to our staff who we expect to guide and direct the children, we don't want to guide and direct them. Right? Low skill workers, we want to roll our eyes at. Like I said, we want to gossip about them more than we want to help them. And this is why I'm presenting the matrix, is because like they're on the matrix, right? Let's say they're 50% of our staff, right? Like is the low skill people. And that's always going to be the thing, because new people are coming in. But yes, I get cranky too. And if I had $1 for every time I was like, why can't they just do it? I'd be a billionaire, honestly. I say that a lot. Has anyone tried any of these interventions and have them work or not work? Where are you on your guidance, excitement, delegation, direction? Any success or horror stories? Because even though I just described this to you, you've been doing this in some degree, even when you didn't name it or put it in the matrix. What's your experience been?
I would say,
Go ahead, Erin. Yeah.
The last place I was at, and it's a number of years ago, I went into it, with staff that, again, were quite young, some excellent leadership qualities, but needed some guidance. And my theory was, after the first summer I was there all the time. Second summer, I was like, okay, so now we're at the point where I should be able to leave. And if something happens to me, you all should be able to, have the confidence that you can take over. And you know, obviously the board would come in and support at that point. It's a little different, but you know, allowing them to do things they'd never done. I had staff that had never, and it sounds silly, but taking a sledgehammer to a piece of crap archery target and beat the crap out of it because it was dead. Like we had to replace it and then rebuild the archery targets, right? They've never done those things. Or drive the van with the canoe trailer on it on a road with other traffic. Like they've never done that. And the funny thing was that they were like, you trust me to do this? Well, yes, you have your driver's license. I've watched you drive it here around site where we're, you know, getting comfortable with it. Do I expect you to be perfect? No, because I will still jackknife a trailer after all of these years. So, you know, it can happen to anyone, let's be honest. And you're being careful. You're treating this thing like it's your baby right now. So you're probably going to be more careful than somebody who thinks they know how to drive it really well. And even the parents' reaction from those staff was like, she let you drive that on the highway? Wow,
That's a leap of faith.
Do that.
It's such a leap of faith for you, Erin, though, because like if someone is identified as low skill, you know, that kind of guidance is, I mean, listen, I'm here sitting saying it's necessary, but also it's a leap of faith, right? You know, to put.
But I can't, I'm one person. I can't be everywhere and do everything.
That's the point.
If they exhibit some common sense, which I think is part of it, there's people I would not allow to do that because their common sense was non-existent, right? So there is that trying to figure that out a bit. But you know, there's nothing that brings me more joy than watching somebody do something they've never done before and be excited about doing that.
Can I go off script for a second? Because you just introduced something. I want to throw this out to the crowd. Common sense, skill or will?
I have an idea of this because I think about this a lot.
Okay.
I would say it's common sense is a skill. And the reason I would say that is because what we call common sense is often just hidden curriculum, which is to say that it's the things that we expect to be like cultural norms, but they may not be cultural norms if we haven't taught the culture.
Fascinating. Anybody from the other side? Anybody placing it on will? You all agree it's a skill? Oh my gosh, I think it's will. I think it's will. Like,
how is it will? How is it will? You and I challenge each other all the time, Chris. How is it will?
No. How is it will? Because like, partly just because like going back to my previous slide, like skill is something that you can learn, can be taught to you. Like Colleen, like it's still filtering what you just said, and that might change my mind in like 3 hours as it like settles. But like when I threw that question out there, my first thought was like, you can't teach common sense, especially if you have a staff member who's like 22. Like they're going to get wiser as they get older. But for me, I just feel like centrally, right? Common sense is like it's like ambition, right? Either you have it or you just don't. So that's why I think it's more will, and that's very interesting.
But
go ahead.
Okay. You know how some people will go and just pull a cord out of the wall? They won't hold the plug, they'll pull it out.
Me, yeah.
Okay, so my kids who are in their 30s, like approaching 40, they would never do that. And that was not because they know that it could break. I mean, that had to be taught to them. To me, that's common sense that you don't just pull by the plug. So that's something that they learned as kids not because of me, but because they had a father who was really picky about stuff like that. So, and I think that, I think the cultural argument is a big one. Like, think about the kids we hear about who are free-range kids, especially in the United States, and others are not. And to some of us, it's common sense that you let your kids go out and play in the woods, and to others, it's not at all. You know, or what do you mean you let those 10-year-olds go to the park alone, right? So where's the common, you know, what's common sense and what isn't is not universal. So there's my.
Yeah. Skills on the skill side. Oh man, you're all convincing me. See, I came in hot. I was like, it's will. It's totally will. But now I gotta think about it. Damn it. Hold on. I just need to write something down real quick.
But if we say it's skill, then how do we teach it? And how much of it is important? If we say it's will, well,
this is I'm sorry to cut you off, Martha, but this is we have to move on, but this is just, I wanted to summarize this for myself, and this is not a question we're going to answer right now in this room. But like for me, the things that I think common sense can be broken down to other things, some can be taught and some are more intuitive, right? I don't know, like for some things, and I'm being dramatic, so I'm trying to make a point, but I don't know if a staff member is supervising kids by the pool and then thinks it's a good idea for them and the other staff member to go downstairs and like get on the phone or watch TikTok or something. I feel like I cannot teach you. I feel like that level, like you just have to have that in you, which is why it feels like will to me. I can't teach you like, oh, you shouldn't leave the kids alone. That's like baseline. So that's where I entered the chat as far as like, oh, this is a will thing. Because I do think some of those other things can be broken down. Some of the common sense things can be broken down into skill. Like you brought up about yanking cords out of the wall, right? That's something you can be taught. Like you could have a bad experience doing it. Someone can point out to you, like lay it out. And then you go, oh, well, I never really thought about, you know, the inside of the cord. I never really thought about those things before. But if you are someone who just is like, oh, well, you know, the kids were already asleep, so I figured it'd be okay to go leave campus and like smoke a little bit. Like that's my face. Like what, okay, you're fired. And, you know, I don't know what else to say. There's nothing to say there. But anyway, like I said, this is, let's argue about this at another date because there's one more thing I need to talk to you about, and that's the hill. This was titled Skill, Will, and Hill. And up until now, I've been like, skill this, will that, skill this, will that. Let's talk about the hill and what the hill is. So, a hill. The hill is the metaphor for any barriers that stop staff from developing their skills or drain their will from participating in the camp community or the camp environment. The thing about hills is that they're usually structural. They're built into our systems. You know, I mean, there's not a lot of physical, actual hills, right? They're things that maybe they started off to be useful, but now they're sort of keeping more people out than letting people in, or they're harming or confusing more people than it's helping, or maybe it's just habits or traditions that we have at our camps or organizations that, again, like the procedures, they made sense at one point and people just stopped questioning them, so they just remain as a hill. Now, hills represent unique challenges to specific identity groups. So we're all going to put on our equity lenses, and we're going to just think carefully, intentionally, and quickly, because we're running out of time, is like when we think about the hills that exist at our camps and organizations, if we think about gender minorities, Black, Indigenous, or or other people of color, or LGBTQ people, what hills exist at your camp or organization that's part of a procedure that stops people, either literally stops them from entering your community, or makes it difficult for them to develop skills and will? Can anyone think of that off the top of their head?
So then you're talking about staff members.
Yeah, I'm talking about staff members.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm listening, but I'm underneath a giant juniper tree in the new property that I'm trying to tame. So if I look all hot and flustered, that's why.
That's
Um,
fine.
we have a trans staff member, and it definitely, our cook also last year was trans. And we had so many good conversations in our board about the gender policy of our cabins. And why do we have a gender policy in 2023? Our cabins are very, very rustic. They only just got electric light in them last summer. There's no water, there's no plug-ins. There's no devices out at our camp. And so kids, like, they don't change in their cabins unless they build little hidey holes for themselves and that kind of thing. And so we have not gotten rid of gender cabins, but we have just opened up. Like, there are all girl cabins and there are all boy cabins and there's mixed cabins. And so families have a choice whether they care or if they don't care at all about how their campers get housed. So that has definitely lessened the hill for not only our staff, but also some of our campers. So, but I mean, it's a 75-year-old camp. And so that tradition was just in place and it had never been questioned until last summer. And so the board moved very quickly to change it, which I'm thrilled about.
That's fantastic. You know, the hill, for some people, the board can be the hill in so many ways. But okay, great. Anyone else?
Okay, back to my juniper.
I know. Anyone else? Can you think of a hill that might exist specifically for members of a particular group? This is usually how hills come up.
I saw somebody just put the same thought I was just having into the chat, and that is our pay structure. Can be, unfortunately, a real barrier to some groups because the realities of life mean for many folks, it's just not a feasible way to spend the summer at camp, unfortunately.
You know, and I've had people turn me down who I suspect to be high skill, high will, but they're like, Chris, just like you said, Isabel, the realities of my life, I can't make $300 a week. Come on, I can make that in a day. And I'm like, work, got it. Anyone else?
Yeah. For us, I think our hill is for our staff of color in particular, is that we are in a community, Huron County. If you look at census data, the number of visible or percentage of visible minorities is 0.3%. And so in Huron County, which is like our whole area. And so we have one young man who is Black who will be on staff this year, and he will be probably the first Black man many of my campers will meet. And he knows that. He's spent a year with us already as a CIT. So he is coming in prepared, and we had that conversation last year before he joined us. But the lack of community for him at camp is very much a hill. And it's something that is, it's difficult to find ways to help nurture that community when you don't have a community to start with. And for him to feel safe and supported at our camp when, like, yeah, he's going to be the first Black man most of these kids meet. And
it's so hard to be the first Black anything, let me tell you.
So
hard.
It's definitely a hill.
That's definitely a hill. Some hills are easier to surmount than others. That's a really difficult one. I mean, it's one thing about capital projects and facilities, like, oh, let's build new cabins. That's in the realm of possibility. Let's change the demographics of the community our camp is in, is maybe something that's a little bit more hard to tackle. Speaking of tackling, let's attack the hill. We're running out of time, so we can't necessarily generate a whole list of reasons. Like, I'm just trying to spark you so you can go off and have these conversations on your own. Removing these barriers requires intention and skill and will on our part. And it's sometimes we push this off on our employees and be like, well, again, if you had enough common sense, if you had enough skill, you can overcome this. But that's not really fair. You know, we as administrators, as people in charge, we are setting the stage for our staff, and it's our responsibility to clear these hills. This is a question I had thrown out, but I'm going to just skip over this because I want to get to the end, and then whatever time we have left, we can talk. But I need to bring this up. What if the hill is you? I can't tell you how many times I've done a staff motivation training, and I do this whole song and dance where I lead the entire room and being like, man, these Gen Xers, I can't believe it. Can you believe they expect me to be on TikTok and DM them? And everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're right. It's so crazy. And I'm like, so you're the hill. You're the hill. Because your staff is telling you how they want to communicate with you. They're telling you what you want, and you're just not doing it because what? You're too old? What? They're too young? What? You know, when we are the hill, this requires, like I said, intention and will and skill on our part. A lot of it is real honesty in looking at the way that we behave, the way that we set up, and checking in with our own value systems. In 31 years at camp, and I've been at every level of this at this point now, I have to be honest, my value system has really changed. Like as my idea of what the big picture is has grown, like what is acceptable, what's unacceptable, ways that I can change versus ways that I know I'm challenged, that has also evolved. I can't stress enough that usually when I work with camp around skill, will, and hill, when I use this matrix, usually the hill is the camp owner, the camp director, or the board. And that's always disappointing because if there's anyone who should be adroit, if there's anyone who should be dexterous in making changes, it should be the camp owner, the camp director, and the board, because they're the ones who are the guardians of the mission and the vision. And so they should be the ones checking in routinely. I just wanted to name check this, is because if we're going to start being intentional about attacking hills, we really have to start with ourselves, what our expectations are of our staff, making sure that it's realistic, and then checking the skill will matrix and making sure that we are cultivating and supporting and nurturing the people around us, even our coworkers on our level, and nurturing them and lessening ourselves as a hill. Okay. I'm going to wrap up. So just some bullet points. Skill, will, and hill. It's super useful in assessing staff. I think it's great. We're doing interviews right now for Camp Highlight. And I talked to my admin staff, and really we have questions that specifically address skill and will now in the interview so that we can try to put people in these quadrants. So by the time they arrive, we have some idea about how we can help them. On top of that, this is super useful when you think about who to bring back. You know, if a low skill, low will worker is still low skill, low will at the end of the season, sorry, but if we can shift them to another quadrant, then one, we can see the progress. And like I mentioned before, if you build a ladder, they can see it too. And like I've already said, hills are not for the staff to dispel. Don't push it off on the staff. That's just, not only is that unfair, it's just a really nasty thing to do. For someone to come in, people are coming in looking for your guidance because you know more. You just do, by dint of your position and by dint of your experience. So it really is on us to be intentional about skill, will, and hill. So here's some questions that I've thrown up there. If you have questions, comments, conflicts, or compliments, now is the time to share them. Anyone? Answer one of these questions we have here, or just chime in with your opinion about what we've been talking about for the past 45, 50 minutes. Or if no one has anything to say, I've delivered this perfectly.
You have, and this is a great transition. Thank you so much, Chris. This is awesome. The first question actually brings up a couple of things. So how intentional I've been in coaching staff. For me, this is something I think about a lot. And we for years have thought about this idea that when a staff fails, how did we fail them? Right? Like when a staff fails to succeed, how did we fail them? And so using this matrix is super important, but also coaching. Janice and I are actually attending a coaching session on how to help coach in April, just before a meeting that we're attending for the Outdoor Ministries Institute at Jumonville Retreat Center near Pittsburgh. Chris, a couple of questions. Will, can you make these slides available for me?
Absolutely. I will absolutely make that available, and also my outline, because why not?
Okay.
You know, I guess I shouldn't share my outline, because then you all could run off and make your own consulting company, and then like, but I don't. We're good, right? You're not.
It's a lot of work.
That's a lot of work. You've no idea.
I have a hard enough time setting up my computer for this session, so come on.
This is only my second year, so just training is going to be hard enough.
I know. Martha, good luck. My contact information is on the screen.
Super.
If you have any other questions, I don't know how much. Do we have any time left, Joe, or do we say goodbye to everybody?
People can stay around if they want to. Yeah. But before everybody goes, I do want to go over a couple of announcements. April 17th is our next talk if you have to leave. And our good friend Vicki Nelson will be back with us to talk about fundraising, where to find funds. There's a more specific topic title that I don't have with me. Janice, do you know that more specific topic title? Oh, Janice.
Yes, it's about monthly donors, and I believe it's like how to find them, keep them, and woo them, or something like that.
Perfect. Monthly donors are like the golden egg for nonprofits, people, let me tell you. The other thing to do is to know that if you are at all interested in attending the Campfire Collective and PCCCA conference this coming November, OMI will have some funds available to help you out. I can't promise as many funds as were given last year, but we didn't have the uptake that we had sort of planned for. So there are some funds, and if you're interested, you can drop me an email, joe@campusbetter.com, and I can give you. I'm also co-chairing that conference. It's in Arkansas, so if you're trying to schedule flights and things, or just to see how much it would cost for travel, you're flying into Little Rock, Arkansas in November. And I don't know those dates off the top of my head, even as a co-chair. So if you need to leave, thank you so much for being here. But if you want to stay and ask questions, Chris, how much time do you have for us?
It's 8:37 my time.
Yeah.
I have a call at 9, so I can stick around for about 15 minutes. If
That's
anybody
great.
wants to use it. Or we could just chat. We don't talk about this. We could talk about RuPaul's Drag Race, whatever. I don't care. Yes, Colleen. Yes, Colleen. Sasha Colby's winning. But anyway, that's okay. That's another day. Anyone? I'm particularly interested in what, if anyone wants to stick around, like the hill part. I'm really interested in what hills exist for you at your camps. If anybody wants to share, I'm going to stop sharing the screen.
So many, but where do we even start? Yeah. So our camp is in the Yukon Territory. It's been running since the 60s, and it's interdenominational. So 4 denominations with belief systems that are as far apart as they can be within Christianity, right? Practically, anyway. And different ways of looking at things like 2S LGBTQ plus, and that's already been a contentious piece. And then anyway, so the money for staff is a big problem because we just have honoraria, and we only hire 4 counselors, assistant director, and everyone else is a volunteer. So that's getting really tough. It's just not like the 60s when we had a lot of stay-at-home mothers, right? So, and then a lot of difficulties, and so trying to get a more diverse population, because Whitehorse is quite diverse and has like 30%, I think, First Nations. But then there's the whole problem of residential schools and religion and the cross on the main building. So there, where do we? And then there's accessibility. We're on the top of a big steep hill down to the lake, right? How do you make this accessible?
That's an actual hill. That's an actual literal hill.
Yes, definitely.
I want to, yeah,
So
I want to throw something into the soup when we talk about hills and attacking them. Uh, and a colleague of mine, Simone Gamble, she is also a consultant. She runs an organization called OR. She's phenomenal. I love her. But everyone loves Simone. Simone often says that your budget is a moral document. And that has been really rocking my world. You know, when I go around to camps and I'm like, we need to degender stuff, like we need to be more accessible to trans, I'm often told, oh, we just don't have it in the budget. But in 2021, when we all roared back to camp, some of us, when we all roared back into camp, the amount of money spent on COVID precautions and all that other stuff, that magically appeared because that was important. And I've been really thinking about this because and Martha, I mean, the truth is how much would it cost to level a hill? I'm sure more than you could afford. I'm sure more than a lot of our camps can afford. But it just gets me thinking about how and where do we spend our money? And it's been particularly troubling for me because, and me and Joe talk about this all the time, is about staff compensation. Mm-hmm. Listen, it's easy to say oh, well, if you value your staff, you pay them more. Isn't your budget a moral document? Yeah, it is. And I don't want to be a hypocrite. But just balancing that, right, with the real world things that we're dealing with, but also keeping in mind that how we spend our money is a moral choice. Yeah. It really has made me a little bit more cognizant, aware, and more intentional about those choices and about that knee-jerk reaction. We can't, it's just not in the budget. We can't afford it. Perhaps we can't, but let's look at where we're spending our money because that's how we're announcing our values to people. Yeah. So
it is a pretty low budget operation.
Yeah.
So yeah, the fundraising next month.
It is a challenge, Martha, and I think that we were talking about in our office today, me and Jory were talking about the fact that there's a price point where a certain level of a certain demographic will not send their kids to us because they believe we can't be good when we only cost this much. Right. So if you have parents who won't send them because we charge $600 a week, and I know there's other camps who charge much less, right? And so those parents will never come. So what they're doing is the hill there is that they're self-selecting out because they think they need to pay more to get a different value. But it means that level of kid and this level of kid from different demographics might never have this. And I don't think in the 70s and the 80s it was quite as large of an idea. And so the idea that you can the idea that people are self-selecting and that there's the differences. So when you say you're a low budget operation, it's this idea that today somebody said, okay, well, this person's going to make $550 a week this summer. And I said, great. And he said, doesn't that shock you? And I said, I made the pay scale. I know that we started to pay a ridiculous amount recently, more so than in the past. But the reality is this is where we need to be. There's no choice, right? There's no choice to follow health guidelines, and there's no choice to follow fire safety. And if we want amazing staff, we don't really have a choice. You're not just going to find them sitting on the side of the road. And if you do, you probably don't want to hire them. Just saying. Because this guy sitting on the side of the road, do not invite to camp. That's
not with that beard, no. No, I'm kidding. I love the beard, Joe. The soup question, we'll talk about it later.
I just wanted to say,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Joe, that's a fascinating point about the registration cost, because our registration cost is lower than yours. Not by that much, but by some. And I never thought about how that's causing that actually might scare off families, and also how that also means not only do we have this issue of then there being a class equity issue in terms of who our campers are and the identities around that. But also that's going to be affecting your fundraising, right? So if you're not getting families if families judge that you're not good enough because you don't charge so much, and those are the high income families that are making, let's be honest, a really questionable decision by making that decision. Those are going to be your families that would be more likely to be able to do the big fund, like the monthly donor or the big fundraising budgets and things like that. And so now that's like impacting your fundraising. And I just never thought about that at all. So that's a fascinating thing for me to think about and bring to my executive director. I'm not saying that we're about to bring our costs up because of it, but it is interesting to think about.
That's a very complicated hill, what you're introducing, Joe. Like, it's really complicated. And man, that's going to bedevil me. Life is complicated.
I think we only have 2 overnight camps in the Yukon that I know of. So it's not like there's competition.
Yeah, and Martha, Janice will get an introduction to this, but for many years I've sat on the Outdoor Ministries Connection Council representing United Church Canada and United Church Canada Outdoor Ministries, and we have all of the mainline denominations there. And we often talk about this idea that outdoor ministries is 95% of the same issues, and that 5% is theological, or is theology, whatever the correct term there is. But the reality is that if you're sharing a site with those people, sometimes that theology is way too much, and turns out more than to be 5%, because they're more than willing in front of you to tell you why your theology is not as good as theirs.
Okay.
Who wins that battle, though? That's not a battle that can be won, right? That's not
something. I'm just trying to keep the kids front and center.
Exactly.
That's not something that can be settled. That's funny. Like, it's funny introducing theological dispute as a hill.
Yeah.
That's I use the image of Sisyphus in the presentation, and that really is Sisyphusian. Like, there's no there. And not to take away from anyone's faith or beliefs. That's not what that's about. It's just about like arguing, competing around them. It's just, especially for what we do, I don't know.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. And they've managed to work things out for, what is it now, 50 years. So
here's to 50 more.
Yeah.
If we can survive the staffing crisis, which I'm the Chicken Little of camping. I keep saying, like, we have about 15 years. Yeah, I was like, we have about 15 years, and then we're all out of business. Which is why I think this is, like, discussions like this are really critical. The camp as a moral document thing is really rocking my world a lot, because, like, how do we want to spend our money? Where do we want to spend our money? Like, what project do we really want to work on? And I feel like it should all be towards accessibility and supporting staff. And we are redoing the budget this year from ground up, because the only way I know how to do things is the hard way. But anyway, it's interesting, especially when you don't have much of a budget. I don't know if that fact makes it harder or easier to cope. But I do think it's interesting that we announce what we're interested in and how we spend money, and maybe even sometimes like where we fundraise from. Anyway, I've been thinking about that. A lot of people, my camp is for profit. We flirted with nonprofit for the first 7 years. And people would draw up like all sorts of like, oh, you can get money from these people, from these people, from these people. And I was like, I don't know if I want to involve Google or Microsoft or the Ellen Show, or like, I don't know what that says about us. And I don't necessarily want to be tied to Microsoft or Google or the Ellen Show, because I don't have any control over what they do. And if they're handing me money, like, that's an announcement that we're both jointly making to the public. Anyway, I'm just going on and on. I like to talk. And I like to talk to smart people about camp stuff. Can you tell?
Well, that is
Oh boy.
awesome.
Yeah. I do have to go, but thank you all for sticking around. I hope this was helpful, and I hope it really challenges you all to use skill and will in assessment, and most importantly, really attack those hills and be honest with yourself if you're the hill. I've had, by the way, I can share this publicly now. This is my last year as the camp director of Camp Highlight. Joe, I don't think I told you that.
No, but thanks for making me feel special.
No, but yeah, I started telling people to Tri-State last week. And why? There's a lot of reasons why. A lot of them are personal, but professionally, I'm the hill. And to level that hill would be more stress on this thing that I built that I'm willing to subject it to. And so the way to attack that hill is to leave. And I mean, should you make a similar decision? I can't dictate for anybody else. The reason why I say this is that sometimes clearing hills is hard, and it's momentous, and it could be expensive and a whole bunch of other things. It doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. I love camp. I love Camp Highlight. It needs to continue. It needs to outlive me. And if the way it can do that is by me stepping away, then I'm the hill.
Right, but do you have really strong people there? Because my uncle did that 25, 30, I don't know, 40 years ago outside Chicago. And that camp is now a prairie.
Ugh. Oh, God.
And it was amazing.
Now, thank you for raising my anxiety, Martha.
Okay.
Oh, God.
You said you got that people.
And it's not lower that anxiety.
I've got to call it all off. Call it all off. No, I'll still be camp director.
Chris, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for sticking around.